Hi everyone, we are Team B. I'm Eric. Today, we are going to present the topic Chapter 26 Saving Investment. Let me introduce my groupmate first. We have Chloe, Tracy, Giovanna, and Kent. So let's move on.
This page is our agenda. We will first talk about chapter summary and then we will discuss problems and applications, question number 8 and question 13. To begin with, let's start with the chapter summary. We have divided two main parts for this chapter. The first part is about financial system. So, financial system help matching one person's saving with another person's investment. And it is a combination of a lot of financial institutions. Regarding financial institutions, there are financial markets, financial intermediaries, and other financial institutions. First, financial markets help savers to provide funds to borrowers directly, for example, stock markets and bond markets. Second, for financial intermediaries, it helps savers to provide funds to borrowers directly. For example, there are banks and mutual funds. For other financial institutions, there are credit companies, pension funds, insurance companies, and loan sharks.
I'm Tracy. I'm going to introduce the equation that we have learned in the last chapter. And GDP is equal to the sum of consumption, investment, government purchase, and net exports. But for a closed economy, which means there is no international trade, so there is no net exports in GDP. Besides GDP, the equation of national saving is equal to private saving plus public saving, and private saving is equal to the income of household minus tax paid to the government and minus the consumption. And public saving is equal to the taxes received by the government and minus the government purchase. In question number 8 of problem and applications, suppose GDP is 8 trillion, taxes are 1.5 trillion, private saving is 0.5 trillion, and public saving is 0.2 trillion. Assuming this economy is closed, calculate consumption, government purchases, national saving, and the investment. For the equation for consumption is GDP minus tax minus private saving. Therefore, the answer is 6 trillion. For the government purchase, the equation is tax minus public saving. So the answer is 1.3 trillion. And the amount of national saving is private saving plus public saving. So the answer is 0.7 trillion. As the economy is closed, therefore the investment equals to national saving, so the amount of investment is 0.7 trillion.
I'm Chloe. For problems and application, question 13. This chapter explains that investment can be increased both by reducing taxes on private saving and by reducing the government budget deficit. Let me first talk about how both policies increase the investment. For reducing taxes on private saving, it increases the incentive for households and the supply of loanable funds will increase, so the investment is increased. For reducing the government budget deficit, the government borrows less money to finance its deficits. So there is an increase in supply of loanable funds and reduce the interest rate. So it stimulates investment. Then the investment is increased. For part A, the question asks why is it difficult to implement both of this policy at the same time. To answer this question, I will talk about both policies one by one. And by setting the situation that the government spending remains constant for both policies. First, the reducing taxes on private saving, it leads to the government's tax revenue decreases. So there will be an increase in budget deficit if there is a budget deficit initially, or there may be a budget deficit if there is a budget surplus initially. But for reducing the government budget deficit, to reduce the government budget deficit, the government need to collect more tax from citizens, so the government's tax revenue increases. So there will be a decrease in budget deficit. Both policies are contradicted to each other because the first policy will decrease the tax revenue, but for the second policy, it need to increase the tax revenue. So it is difficult to implement both policies at the same time.
Let's move on to the next questions. For question number 13b, what would you need to know about private saving in order to judge which of these two policies would be a more effective way to raise investments? So the first thing we need to know is how private saving responds to changes in the government's tax policy. So we have dug a little deeper and discovered that a theory called Ricardian equivalence. This theory suggested that when the government decreases tax, people tend to save all the extra money, then consume, as people expected that the policy that encourages investment actually benefits them for a little while, which in the future, government would increase tax to ease the government's budget deficit. Therefore, based on the equation that national saving equals to private saving, which is y minus t minus c, plus public saving t minus g, while the tax decline matches the private saving increase, so the national saving remains the same. As national saving equals to investment, investment remains the same as well.
The second thing we need to know about private saving is that the relationship between the elasticities of private savings and the real interest rates after taxes.
So, decide the amount of private savings would increase if there is a decline in the taxes.
To explain more, when the elasticity of private saving is high, which the supply of loanable funds is elastic, a percentage change in interest rate is smaller than the percentage change in loanable funds. Refer to the figure, the percentage decrease in interest rate is 10%, while the percentage increase in loanable funds is 40%. Therefore, the reduced taxes on private saving is efficient when the supply is elastic. It can better the investment. But on the other hand, if the supply is inelastic, it means that the percentage change in interest rate is greater than the percentage change in loanable funds. Refer to the graph. A 60% decrease in interest rate have only 20% decrease in loanable funds in effect. It shows that the effect on raising investment is not significant. And based on the first point we have discussed on what we have to know, both policy will not affect much on investment when the supply is inelastic.
Another thing we need to note about private saving is that the saving incentive. The taxes on interest income decrease, then the saving incentive for household will increase because it increased the future's payoff from current saving. So, when the saving incentive for household increase, the supply of loanable funds will increase too. So they will have a lower interest rate and a higher investment.
If there is a expected deflation in the future, the same amount of money in the present can have a larger purchasing power in the future. Therefore, the saving incentive for household will increase, and the supply of lendable funds will also increase. It makes the lower interest rate and higher investment. Here is an example. We can see that the loanable funds of S1 is $1,000 and the interest rate is 10%. When you shift to the right, the loanable funds of S2 is $1,400 and the interest rate decreased 1% and becomes 9%. So we can say that when saving incentive is high, the reducing tax on private saving is more efficient.
Also, if there is a expected inflation in the futures, that means for the goods and service will sustain the increase in a period of time in the futures. The same amount of money in the present will have a smaller purchasing power, so you may need to use more money to buy things. And saving incentive for household decrease, that means the supply of loanable funds will decrease too. The result is they will have a higher interest rate and a lower investment. On this slide, there is a graph shows what happens when the saving incentive is low. First, we can see that when the saving incentive is low, people will save less money, so that the supply curve will shift left from S1 to S2. And we can see that the interest rate increased from 9% to 10%. And also, for the loanable funds, we can see that it decreased from 1,400 to 1,000. So, when the saving incentive is low, reducing taxes on private saving is not efficiency. The last thing we need to know that is the elasticities on investment. Neither policy will have much effects on investment if it is inelastic. And investment incentive credits will increase the incentive to borrow. And the demands for loanable funds come from the households and the firms that wish to borrow to make investments. That means if the incentive to borrow is increased, the demands for loanable funds will also increase too.
To be specific, we would like to explain with graphs. So, the policy on reducing taxes on private saving would increase investment when the demand for investment is elastic. When there is a percentage change in interest rate, it actually causes a greater percentage change in the quantity for loanable funds. As explained by the figure, a 10% decrease on interest rate will lead to a 40% increase in the quantity for loanable funds. Therefore, the policy on reducing taxes on private saving is more efficient in promoting investment when the demand is elastic. However, on the opposite side, if the demand is inelastic, the percentage change in interest rate is larger than the percentage change in quantity for loanable funds. Like the above figure explained, when there is a 40% decrease in interest rate, it only affects a 20% increase in the quantity for loanable funds. As a result, the policy on reducing taxes on private saving have only a little effect on promoting investment. To conclude, as we have mentioned before, the policy on reducing government budget deficit cannot actually increase investment, so both policy cannot promote investment under an inelastic demand on investment.